Arturo Castellanos was born around 1960. He earned the nickname Tablas. In 1979, at age 19, Castellanos was convicted of causing death and sentenced to life in prison. His disciplinary record includes 6 stabbings and various drug offenses. In 1990, he was transferred to Pelican Bay State Prison's Security Housing Unit, a windowless isolation cell where he has remained for over 3 decades. Isolation didn't stop Castellanos. He became a Mexican Mafia member and the undisputed leader of Flores 13, one of Southern California's largest and most powerful street gangs. Castellanos wrote secret notes called kites, smuggled out on tiny scraps of paper. These messages outlined rules for how the gang operated. He established shot callers who coordinated drug distribution, collected extortion taxes, resolved disputes, and oversaw gang territory. 40% of all money from drug deals, extortion, and other offenses was owed to the 4 Mexican Mafia members from Flores 13. In 2004, Castellanos sent orders from Pelican Bay directing his gang to begin cleansing Flores of black gang members, particularly the East Coast Crips. His followers obeyed. Between 2004 and 2007, more than 80 shootings occurred, resulting in at least 20 individuals passing away. Many incidents were racially motivated. Los Angeles County Sheriff Lee Baca said in certain cases, incidents were purely motivated by targeting a black person. When intended individuals couldn't be located, leaders said shoot any black you see. In one case, Flores 13 members came across a black man at a bus stop, shouted an obscenity, and opened fire. In August 2007, federal authorities charged 102 men linked to Flores 13 with racketeering, conspiracy to cause death, weapons possession, and drug dealing. It was the largest federal case involving a Southern California gang. More than 80 were arrested. Castellanos was named as an unindicted co-conspirator and described as the gang's leader running operations from his high-security cell. In July 2013, Castellanos and 3 other gang leaders organized a massive hunger strike protesting solitary confinement conditions. At one point, more than 30,000 of California's 133,000 inmates refused meals. The strike drew international attention from the ACLU and Amnesty International. Prison officials said the strike leaders had a hidden agenda to strengthen criminal groups controlling drug and extortion rackets. After California lawmakers promised hearings, the strike ended after 2 months. Castellanos is now approximately 65 years old. He remains incarcerated at Pelican Bay State Prison in the Security Housing Unit. He has spent 35 years in solitary confinement. Federal prosecutors allege he continued discussing gang business with visitors as recently as 2011 and still receives payments from Flores 13's illegal activities into his inmate trust account. This is what happens when you think you can run a gang from solitary confinement. You write secret notes on scraps of paper. You order racial cleansing of neighborhoods. You cause 20 people to pass away just because of their skin color. You organize hunger strikes while secretly controlling drug trafficking. But federal authorities charge 102 people. Your gang gets dismantled, and you spend 35 years alone in a windowless concrete cell. Castellanos has been locked in isolation since 1990. He will likely die there. The concrete walls never let go. Raymond Shryock was a 20-year Mexican Mafia veteran from the Artesia street gang. He was one of the few white members accepted into l'AME. His wife Bunny and children lived in El Monte. Shryock was involved in multiple violent offenses throughout the 1990s. In early 1995, Shryock discovered that Anthony Didu Morneau, a Mexican Mafia dropout, was living near his El Monte home. Morneau had a death sentence on his head ordered by the gang. Shryock recruited new Mexican Mafia member Luis Pelon Maciel from the El Monte Flores gang to carry out the hit. Maciel used street soldiers from the rival Sangra gang to attack the residents on Maxon Street. Anxious to impress the Mafia, The shooters didn't just cause Didu Morneau and his associate to pass away, they also took the lives of a mother and her 5-year-old daughter and 6-month-old son. The innocent family was slaughtered. The shooters were caught. Along with Pelon Maciel, they were convicted and sentenced to death. But the Mexican Mafia was unhappy with the slaughter of the children. They caused the baby's offender to pass away on the death row exercise yard at San Quentin State Prison. In June 1995, federal authorities indicted Shrierock and 20 others on RICO charges. The case involved racketeering, drug trafficking conspiracy, and multiple incidents that caused death. The trial lasted 8 months and involved approximately 275 audio tapes, 125 witnesses, and 14 videotapes of meetings between Mexican Mafia members. Prosecutors showed how the gang voted on membership, authorized assaults, divided territory for taxing drug dealers, planned incidents, and coordinated drug trafficking. On September 3, 1997, Shrierock was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. He was 45 years old. He is currently incarcerated in the federal prison system serving his life sentence. This is what happens when you join a prison gang. You think recruiting someone to handle a hit keeps your hands clean. You think targeting a dropout is justified. But the shooters you send cause innocent children to pass away. A 5-year-old girl, a 6-month-old baby, their mother, all gone because you wanted to impress the Mexican Mafia. The gang you served turned on the shooter and caused him to pass away too. Now you sit in federal prison for life. No parole, no freedom. The concrete walls close in, and they never let go. Benjamin Peters was born around 1943. He was from the Arizona Maravilla gang. By the 1990s, he became one of the highest-ranking Mexican Mafia members. When Joe Pegleg Morgan passed away from liver cancer on November 9, 1993, Peters replaced him as godfather. But he was immediately challenged for control by Ruben Tupi Hernandez. A power struggle erupted. On July 16, 1991, Peters and Ren boxer Enriquez stabbed Salvador Munn, a Buenrostro 26 times in an interview room at Los Angeles County Jail. Buenrostro survived despite the vicious attack. He was targeted because he made negative comments about Godfather Joe Morgan and caused dissension within the gang. In March 1992, Peters helped plot the demise of Charles Charlie Brown, Manriquez. Manriquez was accused of cowardice after failing to carry out a prearranged stabbing at Chino State Prison in 1991. He also served as a consultant for Edward James Olmos's film, American Me. The Mexican Mafia was enraged by the film. On March 25, 1992, Louisiana EME hitman David Esmillan Gallardo from Big Hazard Gang shot Manriquez to death in the Ramona Gardens housing project in Boyle Heights. Manriquez was one of 2 American Me consultants taken from life by the gang. In 1995, federal authorities indicted 22 Mexican Mafia members and associates under RICO. Peters was described as the godfather and highest-ranking member. The trial lasted 6 months and marked the first time prosecutors used federal racketeering laws against a violent prison gang. The case showed how a prison-based gang extended its influence beyond prison walls into communities throughout Southern California. Prosecutors presented 275 audio tapes, 125 witnesses, and 14 videotapes of meetings between Mexican Mafia members. On September 3, 1997, Peters was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was 54 years old. Mariano Chuy Martinez was sentenced to life without parole plus 130 years for directing Mexican Mafia activity in Los Angeles on behalf of Godfather Peters. 7 other gang members pleaded guilty and received prison terms of up to 176 years. Peters passed away years ago while serving his life sentence. He spent decades behind bars controlling drug trafficking, extortion, and violence from his cell at Pelican Bay State Prison. This is what happens when you become a prison gang godfather. You think replacing Joe Morgan gives you power. You think stabbing someone 26 times sends a message. You think plotting incidents from prison keeps you safe. But federal RICO charges come. The 6-month trial exposes everything. You get life without parole, and you pass away alone in prison. Peters controlled the Mexican Mafia for years, but the concrete walls never let go. Rodolfo Cadena was born on April 15, 1943 in San Antonio, Texas. His parents were second-generation Mexican immigrants, Aneta Alvarado and Daniel Hernandez Cadena. The family moved to Bakersfield, California, where Cadena attended East Bakersfield High School. He joined the Vario Viego gang, now known as the Vario Bakers. Violence came early. In 1959, at just 16 years old, Cadena and Richard Roos stabbed a man to death outside Salon Juarez, a dance hall in Bakersfield. Cadena was convicted and sent to Diul Vocational Institution. While incarcerated, he earned the respect of Mexican Mafia members. The gang was still in its development stage, but Cadena's violent and unapologetic demeanor made him stand out. By 1961, administrators at DVI transferred charter Mexican Mafia members to San Quentin State Prison, hoping to discourage violence. But it didn't work. A notorious incident solidified Cadena's reputation. The story goes that Chan Cadena arrived on the lower yard and was met by a 6'5", 300-pound black inmate who planted a kiss on his face and announced this scrawny teenager would now be his bitch. Cadena returned a short time later, walked up to the unsuspecting predator, and stabbed him to death with a jailhouse shiv. There were more than 1,000 inmates on the yard. No witnesses stepped forward, and only one dead man entertained the idea that Cadena was anybody's bitch. Cadena and Joe Pegleg Morgan, who became his best friend and mentor, led the gang to prominence in the California correctional system. They terrorized other unorganized ethnic inmate groups. They gained a monopoly over the sale of drugs, pornography, prostitution, extortion, and offenses for hire. Cadena continued to run the Mexican Mafia's activities and began to look beyond the walls of prison, envisioning a statewide monopoly of crime. In 1971, Cadena ordered paroled gang members to infiltrate self-help addiction programs and community groups in East Los Angeles. His goal was to establish a gang member presence in as many Mexican-American community groups as possible, and then use those connections to cultivate goodwill, while using the organizations as fronts for criminal activity. Cadena struck an uneasy alliance with Gord Jackson and the Black Guerrilla family. He became active in Latino political organizations, like the Brown Berets. Cadena made overtures to unite LAEME with the rival Nuestra Familia, but his peace talks with members of the Familia were frowned upon by other Mexican Mafia leaders. They ordered the demise of 2 Familia leaders, just prior to an important meeting between Cadena and Death Row Joe Gonzalez, a Familia leader, at Chino Reception Center. The peace mission was sabotaged. With no remaining influence in the Mexican Mafia, Cadena's importance in the eyes of Nuestra Familia was diminished. He was now a target for retribution. Cadena could have saved himself by requesting protective custody, a move that would have shown weakness to the way of life he had fought and taken lives for. His fate effectively sealed, he chose instead to go out the way he had come in, fighting. On his arrival in Chino for the now sabotaged peace mission, he was taunted by the Norteos and told his time would come. The night before his death, Cadena had received multiple death threats and knew that when he left his cell in the morning, he would die. On the morning of December 17, 1972, Cadena was asked if he wanted to leave his cell with the rest of the prisoners. Rather than avoiding his fate and staying in his cell, he stepped onto the tier of his cell in Palm Hall at the Chino Reception Center. Nuestra Familia assassins were waiting. They set upon him. They stabbed him an estimated 70 times. Cadena passed away at age 29. His demise sparked an era of gang warfare within the California penal system. Over the next year, 31 prisoners lost their lives in tit-for-tat incidents. The carnage and animosity from his demise lasted decades. LAEME still has a termination on-site order for any member of Nuestra Familia. Cadena was the basis for the 1992 movie American Montoya. A character based upon Cadena was portrayed by Edward James Olmos. The Mexican Mafia was enraged by certain parts of the movie, especially the portrayal of Santana being harmed in juvenile hall, and a climax in which Santana is taken from life by his own followers. Two of Olmos's consultants on the film were subsequently taken from life. A plot to extort the director was uncovered. This is what happens when you choose violence at age 16. You think stabbing someone outside a dance hall makes you tough. You think responding to disrespect with a shiv makes you a legend. You build a criminal empire from a prison cell. You terrorize other inmates. You monopolize drugs and extortion. You infiltrate community organizations. You form alliances with rival gangs. But then the politics shift. Your peace mission gets sabotaged. Your own allies turn on you. You receive death threats. And you know when you step out of your cell, you're going to be stabbed 70 times. But you step out anyway, because asking for protection would show weakness. Cadena spent 13 years behind bars. He became a legend in the underworld, but he passed away at age 29 on a prison tier. His demise sparked a gang war that caused 31 more people to pass away, and the violence continues today, over 50 years later. The concrete walls never let go. Ruben Hernandez was born around 1960. He was from the Ontario Vario Sur gang, also called OVS or Black Angels. He joined LAME during frequent trips to prison in his late teens. Hernandez became one of the most dangerous inmates in the California prison system. On June 25, 1987, Hernandez was arrested for a triple homicide. On July 19, 1988, he was convicted and sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms plus 16 years in state prison. During the trial, evidence showed veteran EME members called him sir and competed to please him. He was much more than a street soldier. When Joey Morgan passed away on November 9, 1993, Benjamin Topo Peters replaced him as Godfather. But Hernandez, age 35, immediately challenged Peters for control. A power struggle erupted. Hernandez ultimately won and gained control of LAME, which consisted of at least 1,000 active members. From Pelican Bay State Prison, Hernandez directed the collection of drug taxes from street gangs across Southern California. He resolved disputes among members. He authorized assaults and incidents that caused death. In May 1995, federal authorities indicted 22 Mexican Mafia members on RICO charges. Hernandez was charged with furthering racketeering efforts by helping direct the collection of drug taxes. The trial lasted 8 months. Prosecutors presented 275 audio tapes, 125 witnesses, and 14 videotapes of meetings. Evidence showed the gang voted on membership, authorized assaults, divided territory for taxing drug dealers, and coordinated drug trafficking. On May 30, 1997, Hernandez was convicted on racketeering and conspiracy charges. On September 3, 1997, he was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. He was 37 years old. He is currently serving his life sentence in the federal prison system. This is what happens when you fight for control of a prison gang. You think winning the power struggle makes you untouchable. You think directing drug taxes from Pelican Bay keeps you safe, but federal RICO charges come. The 8-month trial exposes everything. You get life without parole. Hernandez controlled LAME with 1,000 members. But the concrete walls never let go. Peter Ojeda was born around 1943 and raised in Orange County, California. His father was a construction worker. His mother was a housewife. Ojeda became one of the founding members of LAME, the Mexican Mafia. For over 30 years he climbed the ranks, gaining power within local street gangs. He became the highest-ranking Mexican Mafia member in Orange County. His nicknames included Santa Claus, the Big Homie, the Old Man, and the Senior. He was called the OC Godfather. In January 1992, Ojeda held a historic meeting at El Salvador Park in Santa Ana. Dressed in a black and white checkered long-sleeve shirt, he stood on baseball bleachers like a king addressing his subjects. Below him stood warring Latino gangs from across Orange County. These were sworn mortal enemies. But they stood docilely together while Ojeda told them to stop the feuding and drive-by shootings. He ordered them to tax drug dealers in their neighborhoods instead. This would fund neighborhood defense and fill Mexican Mafia coffers. The so-called peace treaty spread across Southern California. Mexican Mafia members banned drive-by shootings. The treaty sounded great, but it was a Trojan horse. The system transformed Latino street gangs from neighborhood entities into money-making enterprises. Gang members were permitted to exert influence over their territories in exchange for paying taxes, a portion of proceeds from criminal activities including drug trafficking. Neighborhood gang loyalty disintegrated. Feuding over money in favor of Mexican Mafia members turned gang members against each other. Ojeda's taxation system became the only region-wide organized crime syndicate Southern California has ever known. And he started it all. In 2005, Ojeda was arrested and convicted on racketeering charges. He was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. He was sent to a federal penitentiary in Pennsylvania, but being locked up didn't stop him. He continued running Orange County's Mexican Mafia operations from his cell. He ordered incidents that caused death. He directed extortion schemes. He controlled drug trafficking. He taxed local gangs. His girlfriend Susie Rodriguez, age 53, acted as his messenger. Prosecutors said she was Ojeda's eyes, ears, and voice on the streets. Rodriguez carried messages between Ojeda and local gang leaders while he was imprisoned. She facilitated his criminal enterprise. Between 2008 and 2013, Ojeda was involved in a violent turf war with former ally Armando Mando Marno. Both wanted control over local gang activity. The war caused a spike in jailhouse violence. Ojeda ultimately won by gaining backing from other Los Angeles Mexican Mafia bosses. But the violence was overwhelming. In 2011, federal and local law enforcement launched Operation Black Flag. The Santa Ana Gang Task Force arrested 99 defendants. Ojeda was indicted while still serving his previous sentence. The trial began in late 2015. Prosecutors presented evidence over 2 months. On January 14, 2016, a jury found Ojeda guilty of conspiracy to violate RICO and conspiracy to commit violent crimes in aid of racketeering. The jury found Ojeda was involved in the operation and management of the Mexican Mafia's activities in Orange County, which included orchestrating incidents that caused death, extortion, and narcotics trafficking. Susie Rodriguez was also convicted for acting as Ojeda's messenger. Both faced life without parole. On May 9, 2016, Ojeda was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Combined with his previous sentence, most people figured it was a life sentence. Ojeda was 73 years old. On June 7, 2018, Ojeda suffered a heart attack during an operation at a federal prison medical facility in Springfield. He passed away at age 76. Bureau of Prisons records confirm Peter Jess Ojeda, register number 0076, 112, deceased at MCFP Springfield. YouTube memorials were posted. He died in federal custody still serving his sentence. Of the 99 defendants charged in Operation Black Flag, 59 were convicted on federal charges. The remaining 40 were prosecuted by the Orange County District Attorney's Office. After Ojeda's passing, there was a void in the gang's leadership. Johnny Richard Martinez attempted to replace him. Law enforcement experts said Martinez was much more active, much more ruthless and violent than Ojeda. But Ojeda's legacy remained. The taxation system he created still controls Southern California Latino street gangs today. This is what happens when you think you can control an entire region from a prison cell. You organize gang meetings. You create a peace treaty. You transform neighborhoods into money-making enterprises. You order incidents and extortion from behind bars. You use your girlfriend to carry messages. but eventually the federal task force comes. They arrest 99 people. They convict you of racketeering. You get 15 more years in prison, and you pass away during surgery at age 76 in a federal medical facility. Ojeda spent decades building power. He controlled Orange County for 30 years. He became a legend in the underworld, but he died alone in federal custody. The concrete walls never let go. René Enriquez was born on July 7, 1962 in Artesia, California. His parents were recent immigrants from Mexico. He grew up in a middle-class home in Cerritos, California. He showed early promise in school, but he dropped out of Cerritos High School in 9th grade. René Enriquez idolized his older brother Mark, a member of the Artesia 13 Street Gang. Mark gave him the nickname Boxer and used him to break into neighbors' homes. At age 12, Enriquez was jumped into his brother's gang. Members of Artesia 13 savagely beat him behind a gas station as initiation. By 13, Enriquez was drinking alcohol after a year of smoking marijuana. He already had encounters with law enforcement for property damage. Within a year, he became a regular user and dealer of PCP and LSD. Enriquez went to juvenile hall after he was convicted of armed robbery for holding up convenience stores. In his late teens, Enriquez committed a string of armed robberies and was sentenced to a long period in prison. At age 19, he first encountered LAEME, the Mexican Mafia. While imprisoned at DUO Vocational Institution, Enriquez acted as a hitman for the Mexican Mafia. He stabbed a gang member from Los Angeles who survived. Enriquez later took the life of an imprisoned Vagos Motorcycle Club member nicknamed Chainsaw. In 1985, Enriquez became a full-fledged carnal, a made guy in the Mexican Mafia. He projected the Mexican Mafia into unprecedented organizational structure with a base army of approximately 60,000 heavily armed gang members who controlled the prison system and a large part of California crime. In 1991, Enriquez and another man assaulted Mexican Mafia leader Salvador Mun Buenrostro at a lawyer's interview room in the Los Angeles County Jail. They stabbed him 30 times. Enriquez was sent to Pelican Bay State Prison on California's remote north coast. He was locked in a windowless isolation cell in the security housing unit. Inmates spend 23 hours a day alone without seeing the outside world. But even in isolation, Enriquez ran street operations for the Mexican Mafia. His exploits became legend. Guards and inmates spoke of Enriquez in respectful, almost reverential tones. In 1989, Enriquez was released on parole. He seized control of the narcotics trade in Boyle Heights. One of his dealers was a woman named Cinta Gavaldon, age 28, a mother of 2 young children. She was the sister-in-law of David Gavaldon, a Mexican Mafia member known as Spider who had been inducted alongside Enriquez at Folsom Prison. Enriquez came to believe Cynthia Gavaldon was stealing drugs and cutting the remaining supply to cover it up. He believed she was skimming money. He ordered 2 underlings to take her life. On Christmas Eve, December 24, 1989, Cynthia Gavaldon was shot and passed away. She was a participant and those are the rules, Enriquez later testified. You steal from the Mafia, you're taken from life. Enriquez told the parole board delegating the incident to subordinates was an entirely cowardly act. There's no rationalization that can make my ordering her passing right in any way. It was just wrong. Years later, when Enriquez was incarcerated in the same prison as David Gavaldon, Spider, he asked through his cell door if he had a problem with what happened to Cynthia. No, not at all, Gavaldon replied. According to Enriquez, and the 2 grasped pinky fingers through the door. He understands it was business and that's all it was. Days after Cynthia Gavaldon passed away, Enriquez took the life of David Pelon Gallegos, a Mexican Mafia member who had been branded a coward for running from a gunfight. Enriquez was ordered to perform the hit. An associate injected Gallegos with a large dose of heroin. Enriquez drove him to an alley and shot him 5 times in the back of the head. I had embraced the abyss of violence, Enriquez told the parole board. Enriquez was arrested and charged with Cynthia Gavaldon's incident. He pleaded guilty in return for life imprisonment rather than facing sentencing to death. On March 25, 1993, Enriquez was received into California Department of Corrections. He was sent to Pelican Bay State Prison where he remained for years in isolation. But in 2002, something changed. Enriquez watched a 60 Minutes news feature on child incidents. Then the Mexican Mafia started talking about taking the lives of family members who had fallen into disfavor. Enriquez had an epiphany. After having been a Mexican Mafia member for over 17 years, he joined the ranks of convicted offenders who agree to provide information against their former peers. In 2003, Enriquez defected from the Mexican Mafia and became a federal witness. He provided intelligence to help law enforcement. He decoded gang members' conversations from surveillance tapes. He identified suspects in photographs. He acted as an expert witness in dozens of offenses trials. He spoke at conferences and training sessions. Officials with at least 11 federal and state law enforcement agencies wrote letters to the state parole board attesting to his contributions. Enriquez was credited with providing information critical to a 2013 FBI roundup of alleged Mexican Mafia members in Operation Smoking Aces. Over 5 years he earned $50,000 for informant work while his family received $1,000 per month. Enriquez co-authored books including The Black Hand, The Bloody Rise and Redemption of Boxer Enriquez, a Mexican Mafia killer. But his cooperation came with a price. As a gang turncoat, Enriquez became a target. He was placed in protective custody at an undisclosed federal lockup. Multiple hit orders were issued against him by the Mexican Mafia for betrayal. Despite his cooperation, Enriquez struggled. Soon after dropping out, he was back on heroin and dealing drugs with other gang dropouts in state prison. He had to resist daily temptations. He replaced the validation he once received from criminal underlings with plaudits from agents and prosecutors. At first it fed my narcissism, he told the parole board. Danny Roman was born around 1956 in South Los Angeles, California. He started as a Latino street gang leader in the rough neighborhood southwest of downtown Los Angeles. Nothing suggested he would become one of the most powerful Mexican Mafia figures in California history, but violence became his path to power. In 1984, Roman was convicted of first-degree causing death. The details of that original incident remain unclear, but the conviction changed everything. On January 11, 1985, Roman was received into the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation from Los Angeles County. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was sent to Pelican Bay State Prison, California's super maximum security correctional facility. But prison didn't end Roman's criminal career. It launched it. Behind bars, Roman rose through the ranks of LAEME, the Mexican Mafia. He became a shot caller, one of the most feared positions in the prison system. A shot caller gives orders. Everyone listens, everyone obeys. From his cell at Pelican Bay, Roman controlled more than a dozen Latino gangs across a wide swath of South Los Angeles. His primary gang was the Harpies Street Gang, which claimed territory southwest of downtown and north of the University of Southern California. But his reach extended far beyond. Roman controlled 13 different Latino gangs through violence, intimidation, and a sophisticated system of taxation and extortion. Roman ran his empire like a business. He ordered gang members to engage in drug trafficking, moving methamphetamine, cocaine, crack cocaine and heroin through South Los Angeles neighborhoods. He directed incidents that caused death against rival gang members and Mexican Mafia members who crossed him. He orchestrated robberies targeting residents, businesses, and even USC students. He extorted vendors at the Alameda swap meet, forcing them to pay taxes or face violence. The money flowed back to Roman in prison, every dollar, every week. The system was efficient and brutal, but Roman couldn't run everything alone from a prison cell. He needed someone on the outside, someone he could trust completely. He chose his daughter, Viana Roman was just 9 years old when her father was convicted in 1984. She grew up without him. But by the time she was an adult, Viana became her father's voice on the streets. She acted as a conduit for Danny Roman's orders. Once a month, Viana and her husband Aaron Soto would visit Roman at Pelican Bay State Prison. During those visits, Roman would pass orders using coded language. The prison warden eventually caught on and developed a system to monitor their conversations. Roman would use Spanish slang like SOP blown, which means cooperator or rat, to order someone taken from life. He would reference dead gang members by name, telling Viana to send someone where that person is. Basically, to be deceased like them. Viana would leave the prison with her father's instructions memorized. She would then pass those orders to Manuel Valencia, the shot caller of the Harpies gang. Viana controlled and enforced the collection of tax payments from Latino gangs under Roman's control. He issued orders to other gangs regarding drug sales and the use of violence. If someone didn't pay, they got hurt. If someone cooperated with police, they passed away. Federal authorities began investigating Roman and his organization around 2010. The case started when a gang member became upset over having to pay drug taxes to Roman. This person agreed to wear a wire and secretly tape conversations with gang leaders. 4 additional gang members agreed to cooperate with police. They were tired of Roman's control. They were tired of paying taxes. Investigators began wiretapping Viana Roman's phone conversations with Valencia and other gang associates. In one conversation, she was caught discussing extorting money from vendors in her territory. After a December 2011 meeting between Viana, her husband, and Danny Roman at Pelican Bay, the prison warden banned Viana from returning. Guards had learned the family developed a secret code to speak and were passing information about the Mexican Mafia. On December 5, 2012, members of the High-Intensity Drug Trafficking Areas Task Force arrested Viana and her husband as they walked out of their apartment in South Los Angeles. Federal prosecutors charged 29 people with racketeering conspiracy in a 60-count indictment. The investigation was called Operation Roman Empire. Viana Roman was charged with racketeering, conspiracy to cause death, narcotics offenses, and weapons violations. Manuel Valencia was charged with racketeering and drug trafficking. The indictment alleged violations of RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Danny Roman wasn't charged because he was already serving life without parole, but prosecutors made it clear he was the mastermind. The case went to trial. Prosecutors presented wiretap recordings, coded letters, and testimony from cooperating witnesses. On May 1, 2014, Viana Roman pleaded guilty to racketeering, narcotics and weapons offenses. She admitted acting as a conduit for her father's orders, as he exercised control over the Harpies gang. Viana pleaded guilty 1 week later, to racketeering and drug trafficking. He admitted overseeing gang activities, including collecting taxes from drug dealers, retaliating against people who ran afoul of the gang, and engaging in drug trafficking. On July 28, 2015, United States District Judge R. Gary Klausner sentenced Viana Roman to 15 years in federal prison. On September 8, 2015, Viana was sentenced to 27 years. A total of 24 defendants out of 29 charged pleaded guilty. 3 are fugitives. Charges against 1 were dismissed after his conviction of first-degree causing death in Los Angeles Superior Court. But Roman's story wasn't over. On June 10, 2020, Roman was transferred to the California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison in Corcoran. It was a less secure facility than Pelican Bay. At 10:44 a.m., 2 inmates began assaulting Roman. Correctional officers responded immediately and gave orders to stop. The inmates were identified as Raul Alvarado, age 47, and Edward Cisneros, age 31. They were placed in restraints. Officers immediately began life-saving measures on Roman and called 911. Medical assistance continued as Roman was transported to the prison's medical facility. Roman sustained multiple stab wounds to his body and face. At 11:11 a.m., a doctor pronounced Roman deceased. He was 64 years old. Alvarado and Cisneros were placed in segregated housing pending investigation. Corrections spokeswoman Terry Hardy would not say if they were believed to be members of the same or a rival gang. Retired prison gang investigator Moth Buchner said, "If this was not a sanctioned Mexican Mafia hit, then the retaliation for having one of their members hit is going to be significant." Roman spent 35 years behind bars. He built an empire from a prison cell. He controlled thousands of gang members. He directed drug operations that destroyed communities. He ordered people taken from life. He extorted businesses and terrorized neighborhoods. He used his own daughter to carry out his orders. And in the end, he was stabbed to death in a prison yard by rivals who wanted him gone. This is what happens when you choose the gang life. You think you can control everything from behind bars. You think family loyalty will protect you. You think you're untouchable. But eventually, someone comes for you. The violence you ordered catches up to you, and you pass away alone on a prison floor. Roman's daughter served her time and was released, but the damage he caused to South Los Angeles neighborhoods lasted decades. Families destroyed, lives ruined, communities terrorized, all because one man wanted power and control. The lesson is clear: the gang life leads to prison or the grave. There is no other ending. Joseph Morgan was born Joseph Mio Gorak on April 10, 1929 in San Pedro, California. His parents were Croatian immigrants. His father Gergo was a truck driver. His mother Clara raised him after his father naturalized and anglicized the family name to Morgan. He grew up in Boyle Heights, a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood in East Los Angeles. Despite being white and of Slavic descent, Morgan spoke fluent Spanish and identified with Mexican-American culture. In the late 1930s, he joined the Maravilla Street Gang, one of the oldest documented gangs in Los Angeles. Morgan became a founding father of LAEM, the Mexican Mafia. He was the first non-Hispanic member. He earned the nickname Pegleg because he had a prosthetic leg. Authorities say he lost his leg when he was shot by LAPD during an armed robbery in East Los Angeles when he was 18 years old. In 1946, at age 17, Morgan became involved with a 32-year-old woman. She was married. Morgan beat her husband to death and buried the body in a shallow grave. While awaiting trial, he escaped from jail using another inmate's identification papers. The inmate was being transferred to a forestry camp. Morgan was recaptured. He was sentenced to 9 years at San Quentin State Prison. He was paroled in 1955 after serving his time, but less than a year later, he returned to prison for armed robbery at a West Covina bank. He ran off with $17,000. Morgan committed the first prison gang street execution in Los Angeles in 1971. He was one of the highest-ranking Mexican Mafia members in Southern California by the mid-1970s. He had influence across most of the United States and even as far as Mexico. Morgan was well respected within the ranks of the Mexican Mafia. His connections with cocaine and heroin suppliers in Mexico helped pave the foundation for the Mexican Mafia's narcotics distribution throughout California. Morgan was known for thinking strategically. He persuaded the Aryan Brotherhood to forge a loose alliance with LAEM because they had the Black Guerrilla family as a mutual rival. He also established diplomatic relations with the Los Angeles crime family through Mikel Arizatello. Morgan wanted to set deals with white and black gangs to ensure LAEM would come out the dominant force with little resistance. He played an instrumental part in organizing and legitimizing the Mexican Mafia. His organizational blueprint still shapes the gang's structure today. In 1978, Morgan was sentenced to life in prison. He spent more than 7 months in federal prison for arms trafficking from Utah gang to California. By October 1993, Morgan was serving his life sentence at California State Prison Corcoran. On October 27, 1993, he was diagnosed with inoperable liver cancer. He was 64 years old. His wife requested that he be released on compassionate release. But Morgan passed away on November 9, 1993, before the process began. His attorney Shirley MacDonald said when she visited him about 6 months earlier, he appeared to be losing weight and his color didn't look good. But Joe is a very private person and he didn't complain, she said after his death. In 1992, the film Mexican Mafia was released. It was based on the history of the Mexican Mafia. A principal supporting character named J.D., played by William Forsythe, was a non-Mexican member with an artificial leg. The character was based on Morgan. Edward James Olmos, the movie's writer, director and star, attempted to visit Morgan in hopes of gaining his approval. Morgan refused to see him. He filed a $500,000 lawsuit against Olmos and Universal Studios, alleging inaccuracies in the film. The film controversially portrayed certain aspects of LAEM prison life. Morgan was enraged. At least 2 people were taken from life on account of Mexican Mafia displeasure with the script. This included former Mexican Mafia members and affiliates who had served as advisors during the making of the movie. At the time of Morgan's death, his wife filed a lawsuit arguing that the film did not request her permission for basing one of the characters on him. This is what happens when you choose the gang life at a young age. You think being the first white member of a Hispanic gang makes you special. You think violence and strategic alliances give you power. You beat someone to death at age 17. You escape from jail. You get recaptured. You spend decades in and out of prison. You build a criminal empire. You become a godfather. Edward Ledesma earned the nickname Spider. He was a member of LAEME, the Mexican Mafia. Ledesma was involved in the gang's criminal activities during the violent expansion period of the 1970s and 1980s. He participated in the organization's drug trafficking operations, extortion schemes, and enforcement activities. As a Mexican Mafia member, Ledesma was part of the gang's systematic control over Hispanic street gangs throughout Southern California. The gang operated a taxation system where street gang members were required to pay a percentage of their drug proceeds to LAEME. Ledesma helped enforce this system through violence and intimidation. Members who refused to pay were assaulted or taken from life. Ledesma was involved in multiple incidents that caused individuals to pass away. Like other Mexican Mafia members, he followed the gang's strict code of conduct. Members who showed weakness, cooperated with authorities, or violated gang rules faced severe consequences. Ledesma participated in carrying out these disciplinary actions. The Mexican Mafia's influence extended beyond prison walls. Members like Ledesma directed criminal operations from their cells, using contraband phones, coded letters and messages passed through visitors. They controlled drug distribution networks, ordered hits on rivals and dropouts, and collected taxes from street gangs. Ledesma was eventually arrested and convicted on federal charges. He received a lengthy prison sentence for his role in the Mexican Mafia's racketeering enterprise. He remains incarcerated in the California prison system serving his sentence. This is what happens when you join a prison gang. You think enforcing the taxation system gives you power. You think following orders keeps you safe. But federal authorities build cases against the entire organization. You get arrested with dozens of other members. You get convicted of racketeering, and you spend the rest of your life behind bars. Ledesma chose the gang life. Now the concrete walls are his home forever.